Hello world, my name's Kev F and I'm a comic writer and artist who's been doing it for a million years. Would you like to join me for one of my comic art masterclasses? If you've seen my comic art masterclass before, I usually come into a school, I'm working with a group of about 30 of you, and you're coming up to the board, you're interacting and drawing. Well, this is a long distance class, so we can't do all of those things, but we'll try and do most of them so that every single one of you can create your own brand new comic strip character, and then I can show you how easy it is to take those characters and put them into a comic strip, and then we can produce an entire comic book which will look like these. These are the comics I've done with other classes and groups and schools all over the country, all over the world. This group called their comic Baby Yoda. This group called their comic Tangled. They called theirs Robin Kissing Starfire. They called theirs I Grown a Big Bomb. That's the sort of thing one gets used to working in schools around the country and around the world. I'm sure you could come up with a better title for your group comic together. Now, what would normally happen is that we would produce the components, then I would take them to the photocopier and we would produce something like that. This is a group in a school in Rathdrum in Ireland earlier this year. And they produced a comic called Crack. On the back is a drawing of every single one of their hideous little faces, and given the opportunity I would be doing a drawing of all of your faces. I'm sorry I can't see you, so I can't do that today. And inside there's a comic strip devised by every single person in the class. It's then a very simple task to run this off on the photocopier and take it away with you. Now, we can't do the normal things I'd normally do. Normally I'd have my flip chart. I'd begin by doing a nice big drawing on the flip chart. Here's some of the drawings that I've done, and then you in your school or library or art centre, you get left with the flip chart drawing. Some people frame them, which is quite flattering of them. You see me doing this as you're coming into class in the morning, and you think, oh, that looks easy. It is. The whole point of my class is this is dead easy. I then ask the question, I shall ask you this now. Is there anyone here who thinks they can't draw? Yes, quite a lot of hands up in the air, which is a dreadful thing because absolutely anybody can draw absolutely anything. I would now demonstrate by getting one of you up here, and with just a few lines following my lead, suddenly you've drawn a character. Here's a child realising that they can draw. Here's someone who's just discovered how brilliant they are. Here's someone going, wow, look at me, I can draw. Here, I have no idea what this person is doing. Point is, it's dead easy to do. So, do you have pencil and paper? Pause me if you don't. Just get a sheet of A4 paper, the stuff from the copier, and find yourself a pencil and a rubber if you can, so we can rub things out if we make mistakes. Let's start by drawing something. I'm going to draw a simple little figure for you now. Okay, here's a very simple body like we do in the Beano. I like to call this a baked bean body. If I just do a baked bean there and a baked bean there. Now you can draw a circle, can't you? Okay, so if you can draw a circle, you can draw another circle and another circle and another circle. And you could draw another circle, you could draw another circle, and you can probably do the letter L backwards and a little bit of a circle there. And you could probably do another bit of a circle there, a suggestion of a circle there, and there's a little bit of a circle going up there. Now, is that looking like a character out of the Beano yet? Legs. If you get your legs coming out at the bottom there, and your foot, a little bit of a circle there. You've got your leg coming out there, and your foot could be a little bit of a circle there. And then where do the arms come? Where do the arms come? Say stop when I get to the place where the arms come out the body. Yes, a lot of kids, year 3, year 4, seem to think their arms come out there. Your arms, of course, come out of your shoulders, and we can draw a circle, can't we? Good. If you can draw a circle, then if you want to draw a hand, as long as you remember your thumbs come out the side and your fingers come out the end, thumbs come out the side and your fingers come out the end, I have drawn a character from the Beano. I might do a little bit of a circle down there, a little bit of a suggestion of a circle there. There's your belly button, there's your pants. And now I'm going to get a pen to go over it all. Yeah, you notice a subtle change in lighting. My lights just fell over. So there's lots of pens you can use. This is quite a good one. It's a Pentel pen. Costs you, I think, just £3. You can get them from WH Smith, or nowadays you can get them online. And let's just see if I can go over these pencil lines. As you go over the pencil lines, you'll be deciding which ones you want to make thin, which ones you want to make thicker. With a brush like this, if you press heavily, you get a thick line. If you press lightly, you get a thin line. And as I'm discovering, this pen is running out rather badly, so it's not going to give me the best lines of any pens I've ever used. Anyway, still. Didn't take very long to draw a very fat, nothing like Dennis the Menace, generic character. So, now it's your turn. Let's invent a character. Let your imaginations go wild. Have a look here at just some of the characters that kids have created working with me. Usually they are left entirely to their own ends, and this is what they come up with. Don't be afraid of copying. One thing I will do in the class is scatter a whole load of comics around the room. I learnt to draw as a kid by copying from comics. Remember, when you're at school, copying isn't cheating, copying is learning. I started to copy figures from comics, then I would copy from photographs, then I would copy from real life. Has anybody at school ever been told, don't copy things, just make it all up out of your head? That would be madness. That would be like going into an English class and your teacher saying, you see the alphabet, ignore it, make your own up. You couldn't, could you? You couldn't write words and sentences and books unless you'd first learnt what all the letters looked like, and you can't draw anything out of your head until you've put it in your head in the first place. So, anything you want to know how to draw, ask me and I could show you how, or find reference. If we're doing this class in the library, there's reference all round. In an ideal world, you could find reference at your fingertips. In fact, I quite often use myself as reference. Here are some examples of me posing rather oddly. You'll find this on my camera phone. Why am I posing like that? Because I used it to do this drawing. Here's another drawing from my new graphic novel, Prince of Denmark Street, and here is the rather embarrassing pose that I did for it. Here's another picture from the book, embarrassing pose. You see how this works. Quite often, in order to get a pose right, I'll just point the camera at myself, and then that helps me to do the drawing. Here's a top tip for you. Never leave home without a naked man in your bag. I take one of these into the classroom with me all the time. A poseable figure like an action man is a very useful drawing tool. As long as you pose them in slightly more realistic poses than that. Don't be afraid of using this to help you to get poses to look realistic. Pose for yourself in front of the camera. Every little helps. You can't draw it out of your head until you've put it in your head in the first place. So please, please, please don't be afraid of using reference. Now, this begs a very good question. Where can you find comics? A lot of people ask me this. A lot of people in far-flung corners of the country that I go to are amazed when I scatter the comics around the room. They say, where do you get these comics from? Because we're in lockdown, I can't just say go to your local comic shop. So here's the top 10 comics that you can find for a £5 or less online. At number 10, that music's probably copyright, don't take me down YouTube. Number 10, Marvel and DC comics. They're quite hard to find for less than a tenner, impossible to know where to start. I'd love to recommend the classics like Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four or Steve Ditko's Spider-Man, but looking online I can't find paperbacks costing less than a tenner, sort of £10 or £15 for those. I suppose it's no consolation to tell you that when I was a kid they used to cost 8p an issue. Keep searching though, there are classic Marvel and DC comics to be found. Number 9, Beano subscription. You can get a Beano subscription for $7.95 for your first 13 issues, and then you will discover if the Beano is for you. And a lot of people at home will like to read the Beano. That wasn't a good sentence. Number 8, the Phoenix subscription. If you've not come across the Phoenix, and you can get it in your supermarkets, as you can get the Beano as well, 6 months will cost you $59.99. That's £2.30 an issue. Frankly, it's worth that for Lushkin alone. If you've not seen Lushkin, please check out the Phoenix, a weekly British comic. Yes, they do still exist. At number 7, 2000 AD comic. People of my generation grew up on 2000 AD comic. Well, it still exists. And not only can you get an £11 a month subscription, it's even cheaper to get the digital version. And then the publishers, Rebellion, do a range of books from the entire history of UK comics, old and new. You can get Roy of the Rovers, brand new comic book, and this is a book-length book for less than a £5. And type in Treasury of British Comics. You will find, because Rebellion own the back catalogue for what used to be called Fleetway and IPC comics. They've got classic humour, adventure, girls comics, as we used to call them, including Misty. You'll find the best range of British comics anywhere by looking for Rebellion and looking for the Treasury of British Comics. Number 6 in my top 10 list of where you can find comics for under a fiver online, type job lot and the name of your comic character into eBay. Job lot. I tried this looking for X-Men, Batman, The Spirit, a personal favourite of mine, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man. Put in those and job lot and I found a good lot, sometimes 5 comics, sometimes 10 comics, sometimes 20 comics, and you could get them for a fiver. You don't know entirely what you're going to get, but if you want to start building a comic collection or start reading comics and finding out what you like, job lot typed into eBay is a perfect place to start. Number 5, online comics or web comics. Now, I cannot claim to be an expert or to be up to speed on what is available online as comics that you read online, but one of the best places to start would be Aces Weekly. Aces Weekly is a British new comic anthology. It's run by David Lloyd, the man you'll know from V for Vendetta, and you can find him and his work and the work of an amazing array of the top artists by looking at Aces Weekly. As for other web comics, googling online comics, you will find great new material and you will be amazed and surprised. Number 4 on the list, Manga. Now, I am the last person to come to with advice on Manga. The best person to ask is your pet 14-year-old. They will really know what is what on Manga. But if you go to bookdepository.com, I have found a good place to find good cheap manga. For a fiver you can get My Hero Academia, Attack on Titan, Tokyo Ghoul, One Punch Man, Naruto, One Piece. Those are very long established titles, but all those and the newest titles, and they are at that usual affordable price of just under $5.99. Number 3, independent comics. Now, in an ideal world, all the comic festivals that I was intending to be at this spring and this summer and this autumn would be taking place, and that is where you will find self-publishers, independent publishers selling their wares, representing their stuff. The best thing to do is to go around the tables and see what's new, see who looks exciting. You will have your minds blown. The best thing you can do now is to go to the online presence for any comic festival, but the best two would be the Lakes International Comic Art Festival, which was supposed to be in Kendal in October, and the Thought Bubble Festival, which was supposed to be in Leeds in November. They may still take place. Online you can find out their guests, you can find out their exhibitors, you can do the same for any comic festival. Then you can seek out their wares. Have a look at the work that's there. That is the future of comics. Those are the best things to be looking for if you want to know what's what and who's who in comics today. For my top 2, I've just suggested what I think are some of the best comics in the world. So if you go online to Amazon or eBay, you will find any Tintin book and most Giles books. A lot of people don't think of Giles as comics because he just does one picture at a time, but it is my favourite work, what can I say? Look for Tintin, look for Giles, you'll find them for less than a fiver. And at number 1, Asterix books. There is no better example of what can be done in comic books than Asterix books by Guzeni and Uderzo. Get the first 20 years worth of books, those are the ones worth having, and you can get them all for a fiver or less at eBay or Amazon. So, while I have been rabbiting on, I hope you've been drawing. Have you all drawn something? Here are some more examples of things that kids have drawn in my classes. While they're doing these drawings, we give them 15-20 minutes to do that. I have drawn the front cover of the comic. Here's me drawing the front cover of the comic, and here's a finished comic. I colour them as well after the fact, and then I send those back to you. So we've got the first starting blocks for a comic. Now, you want to take your characters and put them into a comic strip story. I have various ways of making how to put characters into a comic strip fun live. In the classroom I do all this stuff in a way that I do something, you laugh, you don't even realise you're learning anything. It's brilliant, you have to be there. Please, when everything goes back to normal, let me come to your school and we'll all have fun. However, here are some top tips for taking your characters and putting them into a comic strip story. Tip number 1, put a border around the edge. In professional printed artwork we do this, it's called the grip edge. If you have a look at my artwork from a Marvel comic page, and this is somebody's artwork from a Marvel comic page, you'll see there's a blue border printed around the edge. There's a couple of blue borders. One is the grip edge. You're not allowed to draw outside that line, so the printer knows where the artwork ended. Then there's a dotted blue line called the trim edge, so that when the page is printed, they then chop along that edge. So some drawings will go over the edge of the page. This is called the bleeding edge of the page, and others will stay inside the border. In my case, I keep everything inside the border. French comics and classic comics like Tintin and Asterix and the Beano mostly stay inside that border. The bleeding edge is used a lot in superhero comics. You'll find many superhero comics and manga which go over the bleeding edge of the page. But for your purposes today, if you draw everything inside like a centimetre border, then if you put it on your scanner or a photocopier, everything will print and nothing will get cut off. Tip number 2, frames can be any shape. People may be tempted to use something like Comic Life, which draws the frames for you. But remember, look at comics, see how they've used the frames. Some people use a rigid frame, all the same size. Newspaper, funny comic strips regularly do that because they have to fit into a certain page. Humorous strips, like the ones I do for my Bible stories, I have a regular 9 panels to a page grid for those, or a 6 panel to a page grid, which is what I use for Finlay Macbeth, and then you can vary it so you can get more impact for some pictures that need to be bigger, and you keep the routine beats of the storytelling for pictures that you want to be the regulation size. Now that's just the way I do it, but have a look at how some people have worked. Look at this manga page with its dynamic pictures going all over the place, diagonal pictures, zigzag pictures. Here we have a superhero page. In all genre, make the decision as best tells your story. As long as you can see where the pictures are going, see where one ends and the next one begins, you want to make it easy on your reader to go from left to right and down the page and see what's happening. But I would beware of anybody who tells you there's one way of doing it. The French, the Italians, the Belgians may have many traditions and styles of drawing stories. The Japanese may have many traditions and styles of drawing stories. The Americans and certainly the Brits have lots of ways of doing things. Once upon a time, all comic strips used to be done like Rupert Bear, where you'd have a picture with no voice bubbles and words underneath. Tiger Tim and the Bruin Boys and so many, and Black Bob in the Beano and the Dandy used to be done like that. And then we discovered other ways of doing it. Throughout the years, throughout a whole century of comics, writers and artists have been devising new ways of varying the traditions and finding different ways of telling stories better, more suited to their style. So manga is told quite often in a real-time style, and superhero stories are quite often told with thought bubbles over, captions over, people's names floating beside them. There are lots of bizarre techniques that have grown up over the years. You can absorb and use any of these, and if you're the genius that someone out there is, you can invent new ways of doing this, ways that people hadn't thought of before. One of my favourite creators was Will Eisner, who wrote and drew The Spirit newspaper strip, now collected up into comics and collected up into books. You can find The Spirit books for under a £5, and I would recommend you seeking out Will Eisner's The Spirit. Many of the things that he invented in like 1948, 1949 still look revolutionary now, because you'll find a lot of people who are stuck in rigid ways of thinking have forgotten all the ways that you can break the rules. If someone tells you there's one way of drawing faces, no, there isn't. If somebody tells you you've got to work from real life, you should never work from real life. You've got to put backgrounds in every picture. You should never put backgrounds in every picture. You've got to colour in a certain way using certain techniques, using flatting and then etching into the shadows. There's lots of ways you can work. You can colour in pencils. You can make a comic strip entirely out of photographs. You can draw the comic strip entirely on your tablet, entirely on your screen, or you can do it entirely on old-fashioned bits of paper with pencil and pen or biro. Rules are there to be broken. And if you've got a story to tell, you've got to tell that story in your way. Now, another tip I would give you is draw big. You don't have to, some people don't, but mostly we draw the artwork A3 and shrink it down to A4, or in the case of my recent books, I've drawn the artwork A4 because I'm shrinking them down into an A5 book. If you're looking at a lot of manga, like Naruto, Black Butler, etc., that artwork was drawn sometimes A2 and then eventually shrunk down into the manga-sized book that you see. Why do we draw it so big? You get in more detail, so that when you shrink it down, you look like you're a better artist than you already are. It is a simple way to make your artwork look better when printed. I'm assuming many of you already know that, but many of you probably didn't. So, don't draw actual size, draw twice as big. Similarly with your voice bubbles. You draw them nice and big and clear, put space around the words. Everything that helps someone to read your story is what you're striving towards. And finally, don't do what everybody else does. I mean, you can do. If you want to produce another comic which features superheroes, even though the publishing industry had fairly well decided that superheroes were old hat by the 1950s and were striving to do anything but superheroes. Superheroes had a bit of a comeback in the 1960s, and since then, a lot of people seem to think that comics are superheroes. I hated superhero comics as a kid. I read a lot. I read Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four from the 1960s, but then I was reading anything that wasn't superheroes. I was reading Swamp Thing, I was reading Howard the Duck, I was reading Deathlock the Demolisher, Dracula Lives, Werewolf by Night, Planet of the Apes. I've enjoyed those 100 times more than superhero comics. And comics which have told real life stories, comics which have told fantastical stories. In my particular taste, I love humorous stories, which is why I love Asterix, which is why I love Will Eisner's The Spirit, which is why I've loved so much of Alan Moore's work over the year. I didn't mention Alan Moore, and I'm not entirely sure if you can get Alan Moore's work for a £5. I hope you can, probably from Rebellion. Anyway, don't do what everybody else does. You can do comics about absolutely anything. Just because all your mates are drawing manga faces that look like Sailor Moon but can't be bothered to draw the rest of the bodies, and if they do, they draw them with their hands behind their back because they don't like to draw hands, you don't have to do that. You could draw people with tentacles. You will benefit from breaking the mould. The most impressive comics ever have been done by people who were largely told, oh, you can't do anything like that. If you've ever heard of Viz Comic, younger readers look away now. Viz Comic was done by somebody who ran off copies on a photocopier and then sold them round pubs. Humorous comics with swear words in were exactly what you couldn't do. Went on to be the most successful comic of the 1980s. The Eagle comic in 1950 began with its lead story being about a vicar. He was going to be a vicar in the East End, then he was going to be a space vicar, and then they decided to keep the space bit and lose the vicar bit and turned him into Dan Dare. Yes, the most famous British comic strip character probably ever, and it was just based entirely on things you shouldn't do. And that was a reaction to the horror comics, EC horror comics. Oh, seek those out. They're hard to find for under a £5, but if you can, they're worth it. And they were at a time when everybody would have said, you can't make money doing horror comics, nobody will buy them. Every great success comes from doing something which nobody else is doing, probably because people think you can't do it. I am doing humorous thriller adaptations of Shakespearean stories set in 1977. Probably people are saying you shouldn't do that because you shouldn't do that, but anyway, try and do something original, please. Now, have we all drawn a character? Good. Have we all taken that character and put it into a comic strip story? Excellent. If I was in the classroom with you, I'd be getting you to finish off your pictures in felt tip pen, black felt tip, so that it would print nicely on the photocopier. You can do it in any way you like. Finish off your work in colour, I don't care. And of course, while you're doing your drawings, I would be doing a drawing of your face. I will happily do a drawing of your face when next I see you. It's all part and parcel of the class. Now, do you want to know how to produce one of these on a photocopier? It's dead simple. All you have to do is take the A3 front cover and shrink it down to A4. That's the easiest thing a photocopier does. Then take all those A4 pages of artwork and put them on the N on 1 setting.
There's always an N on 1 setting, sometimes it's hidden away, but it's there. So you feed in 4 sheets into the 2 feed and they come out 1 to a page. So you feed in 4 sheets and you get 4 pages all on 1, and you do that again with all those. So if you've got 30 pages of artwork, those just shrink down to a dozen, maybe 16 pages, and then if you've got any spare pages, you fill them up with the big images. It depends entirely on how you do in the class, but with the back cover you do the same. You do N on 1, and then you take the 4 to a page faces that you've got, feed them in again, you'll get 16 to a page.
That should give you 2, 4, 6, yes, 12 A4 pages, which you then put into the sheet feeder, put it on the booklet setting, if it's got a booklet setting. If not, you have to do some finagling with the duplex, and that'll come out. If you're really lucky, you've got a photocopy that staples it, all the better. If not, nobody ever complains that these aren't stapled. It takes about 10 minutes to produce one of these from the components that the kids have produced in the classroom, and then everyone gets one of these away in their hand. They get their caricatures to take away, they get the original artwork from their comic strips to take away. We do that in 2 hours in a normal class. I've done it slightly faster today because you aren't there to shout at and embarrass. I don't know what happens in the class. I'm always on this side of the table, you're always on that side. My comic art masterclass will be coming back to schools when all the virus is no longer floating in the air. If anybody has any questions or would like to show me your work, please show me your work. You'll find me at Kev F Comic Artist on Twitter or Facebook. Show me your work and I will share your work and I will give you feedback. Thank you for participating in my comic art masterclass. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.